Morning, everyone. And I hope I'm not being forward by also saying morning maybe to the 3 people on the YouTube stream. Am I lying? Oh my God! Oh my God! Gosh! So good morning to everyone in the room, but most importantly, good morning to the 10 people on our YouTube stream. I hope it's not my mother and her friends and Manaja's mother, father, brother, Wikanyo, your people, the Lettuce folks. I hope it's not just those folks. I hope it's other folks. Morning, everyone. My name is Keamogetswe Seipato. I am based at My Vote Counts. And today I have the lovely and fun opportunity of being your MC. I might not drop bars, but at least I can hold a sentence. So, luckily I'm not an urban poet like Hendrik. So, unfortunately or fortunate, I am an MC with a lot of energy, so I move quite the room a lot, and I like to laugh. And sometimes you might not laugh at me or with me, but I'll laugh at my own joke. That's how cool I am, right? Right. So, we can all see the program projected on the screen, but for those who are on the live stream with us, we're having a welcoming and opening, and then we'd move on to Minaj Jenna, who's coming on. Then after Minaj Jenna would have Buikanyo Moloto come through and set the scene. If you do not know where you're at, Buikanyo will let you know. After that, we'll let Ntate Terry, the esteemed Ntate Terry, Arosarele Mogala. After Ntate Terry, we'll then move on to a brief question and comment session, which I will not be leading. I know nothing, but Buikanyo knows. So ask Buikanyo all the questions. I'm just here to look cool. I'm just telling the truth. No shade. And then we'll have a wrap-up and closure. Are we all good? Are we all happy? We're hoping to close at 12. Unfortunately, Johannesburg traffic has put us on the D. So we're expecting some comrades to join us in the room. Vibrant amount of comrades. We're very excited about those comrades to be in the room with us. So please do forgive us if you hear some random noise in the next 20 minutes when folks come in the room. I wanted to say welcome and thank you so very much for coming and joining us to the Civil Society Electoral Reform Panel launch. As My Vote Counts, we're deeply excited at this pivotal moment of this launch, but most importantly, for us, it marks one of the things in which we're hoping civil society and many other folks within the country would start to celebrate our 30 years of democracy by thinking of ways in which we can take part in democracy. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Minaj Jenna, who's actually sitting on my chair.
Where's our panel? They need to be in the front. Nicole, Dan, Mafora. Who's missing? Comrade Tapelo, Mazibuko. Is that it? Okay. Okay. Can everyone please move to the front for aesthetics? So okay. Please, can you move to the front? Okay, mine is short. It's just to welcome and open the session. Colleagues, comrades, members of the media, everyone on YouTube, welcome to what I hope would be a historic moment in our democracy. I think it's significant that we're launching this panel here at Constitution Hill, a space that commemorates a revolutionary, people-led process that led to the adoption of the Constitution. a piece of document that is known as one of the most progressive in the countries, in the world, and it has many promises for liberation for people of this country. The reason why I think it's significant is because in trying to think about how we develop a campaign like this, we took inspiration from that process, that revolutionary people-led process that led to the adoption of the Constitution. You know, if you were to ask Parliament now, if as voters, as people, if you were to give Parliament the task of drawing up a constitution, Parliament's not going to put in there the public protector and all these things that can fundamentally challenge the power of existing power structures. If it compromises that, such a document could have only been developed and adopted through a people-led process, and this is especially important when it comes to political reform, because political reform, radical political reform would inevitably challenge the power of existing power holders. Therefore, this space that we're in is especially significant. I think that this panel and this process, which Boikanyo will speak more about, is especially important for two reasons. The first is that it follows a state panel. So the state has set up a panel, an electoral reform panel, and I'd like to welcome two members of the panel, Advocate and Dr. Albertus, who both have come here to work with us. The state has set up a panel, and I think this is an innovative way to engage the state. So beyond the other ways that we use as civil society, as activists, to engage the state in demanding our constitutional rights, including protests, including using the courts, this is a new and innovative way to engage the state. We're setting up a panel that looks similar to what the panel of the state looks like. We have no intention of setting up a shadow panel or anything like that. Ours is to set up a process that holds the state to account. The second reason why I think this panel is important is because amidst the many deepening crises we have in this country, amidst the political crisis, amidst the fact that the 2024 election showed us that there's no political alternative to the ANC. We also have a lack of imagination, especially as civil society. And this kind of process allows us to imagine. The main mandate that we've given to the panel is to imagine something different. Not just in an electoral system, or not just political systems, but to imagine a democracy that works and that works for people. And that's the second reason why I think this process and the launch of this panel is especially important. And with that, I'll hand back to...
Thank you, Minaj, for that intro. And thank you for underscoring the importance of what is it that we're trying to do. I think it's quite significant what you mentioned, Minaj, around the fact that this is not a shadow panel. Coupled with that, the most important thing in relation to the fact that we are wanting to imagine and work in innovative ways. Everyone needs to take part in building the country, and everyone needs to take part in making sure that the country works. So members of civil society need to be doing that too, and the idea of the panel is that. I'm going to hand over then to Boikanyo Moloto, who will deeply set the scene, the why, the how. I don't know why she's always shook when I add beautiful adjectives on what she's going to do. Maybe I need to think twice. Over to you, Boikanyo.
Thank you, Kia. Good morning to everyone. My name is Guikanyo Moloto, the political systems researcher at My Vote Counts. Firstly, I just wanted to take us back, right, to the dawn of democracy. I've realized in the past couple of months, speaking to this process, speaking about this project, that people seem to think electoral systems is inaccessible, number one, which probably is, but also it makes it seem like we are starting a new debate. This debate has existed from the dawn of democracy in the country. Electoral reform has been part of the debate around democracy and what that looks like. When the elections took place in 1994, they took place under the electoral system, the current one that we do have, proportional representation, and it was chosen for its inclusivity, but also its simplicity at the time, considering the context during that period, right? A lot of important work and debates and conversations were had around electoral systems or electoral reform. This took place between 1994 and 1999. We can't obviously record all of them right now, but maybe to provide a summary, right? Some of that important work was done during that period was a survey that was done immediately after the 1994 elections, just collecting the views on electoral reform from political parties, but also submissions were made consequently to that, right? And then we also have the main arguments that were stated or were tabled at the workshop of theme that occurred during that period. We have the Committee 2 of the Constitutional Assembly, which happened in 1994. We have the main arguments that were tabled at the ISA Roundtable on electoral reform, which was held in 1998. And then subsequent views that were had across the country in 1999 that were pronounced, whether by politicians or by citizens or by NGOs. The major work that's been done since then has been the Van Zyl-Slabbert reports commission that we all know about, whose recommendations were not implemented, right? And then we have the other major process, which was the Ministerial Advisory Committee. Their recommendations were also not implemented. And that is not to say that no other work was done in between with regards to electoral reform, but those are the major ones that we see. And when we were conceptualizing this idea of the Civil Society Electoral Reform Panel, we had to look at that background and say, okay, how do we provide support? How do we take part in this democracy within this particular conversation of electoral reform, right? All these major processes have been done before, no implementation has occurred. So how do we then get involved in a meaningful way? So in the formation and conceptualization of this panel, we also had, so in the formation of the panel, put out a call at the beginning of the year, a public call. Immediately after that, we also sent out invitations to various organizations asking if they'd be interested in work around this, around electoral reform. So some of those organizations heeded that call, and we have those people here today. Part of the reason that we reached out to organizations and asked for representatives from those organizations is also looking at the fact that some of those organizations and social movements have constituencies, right, have the reach that we would like to have if we want to have public participation processes during this process, right? So we've got 9 representatives as part of the panel who are part of different organizations in different spheres of civil society. Maybe I'll just start by introducing, on my left, we've got Ntate Teritilane, who's from ISA. We've got, sorry, we've got Tapelo Mohapi, who's from Abahlali Basemjondolo. We've got Nicole Fritz, who's representing Defend Our Democracy. We've got Dan Mafura, who's part of KSEC. We've got Tate Mez, who's representing Zabalaza Pathways Institute. We have got Equal Education, Makanata. Yes, Ausma Kanata, who's representing Equal Education. The main panel member from Equal Education was unable to be here today. So was the main panel member from AFACES, which is Ms. Nontando Ngamlana, but we've got her representative here today, which is Lindo Guhle. Thank you so much for coming. So that is the panel that we have formed. I will also be part of the panel as MBC and serving as secretariat. The panel will operate in a manner. We won't have a chairperson, for example, right? So while we want to have a panel that works in collaboration and exists within the sphere of electoral reform, like Minaj said, it is not in opposition, it is not to counter the state panel. In fact, we would love opportunities to collaborate. But I think that it was important also to have this panel because when they are also done with their work and maybe we reach the same conclusions, we would then be able to advocate for the same things in a meaningful way and provide the pressure that is needed to push the work that they would have done, right? So that they are not wasting their time the next couple of months like previous panels have had to do, where they put in a lot of work and a lot of resources were used, but none of those recommendations actually implemented. So we'd also like to provide that support where possible. Yeah, I think that is my part. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vikanya, for that. I'm hoping the 10 people on the stream are not only 10 people. 20. Gosh, look at us. Ndate already. Ndate show. Ndate I when I go show. Are you aware that there's 20 people more YouTube right now waiting for you to mic? Our family members, our cousins twice removed. I'd like to send a shout out to my mom. Thank you so much, Mikanya, for setting the scene and sharing with us exactly what it is that we're envisioning, why we got to this point, and why is it actually important. I'm wanting to reiterate over and over again that this is not a press briefing. This is a launch. So let's hold that also. Similarly, we're launching saying that we're wanting to collaborate and hold hands with others, broadly within civil society and the government itself. So I'm wanting to underscore those things. So even those people who are brewing with questions, remember where to locate your questions. I'm going to hand over then to Ntate Teritselane, who is a panel member, but who's going to be giving contributions on behalf of the panel today. Over to you, Ntate Ter.
Thank you very much, and thanks to colleagues who have joined us today, and members of the panel that has been appointed by Parliament to work on the electoral reform. You're most welcome. I think Wikanyo has already indicated what we developing. And then this is informed largely by the history that she has outlined. And this history starts in 2003 with the establishment of which was headed by Dr. Francis Labert, which tried to look at the electoral reform and try to see what kind of mechanism could be thank you, in our electoral landscape. Unfortunately, Parliament, again, when they look at that report, they decided to stick with the minority report. And essentially, the minority report was saying there is nothing wrong with the current system, so don't fix what ain't broken. And that's what Parliament decided to stick with. Later on, in 2017, there was a high-level panel on the assessment of the legislation, which was headed by former President Motlanthe. That also came up with some recommendations. Those recommendations were not implemented. And again, in 2020, there was a court ruling following the new nation movement's submission to the Constitutional Court. And again, following that, the Parliament decided to establish a committee that was going to be assisting in 2022. It was called the Electoral Reform Panel. Now, that panel again decided to stick with the minority report, which was referred to as a minimalist approach, basically saying, we think we are still fine. And yet, the majority of South Africans have been saying there is something wrong with the electoral system. Something has got to be done in order to be able to fix this problem. And we therefore got together as civil society organizations in order to try to confront that, because we're not convinced that Parliament will actually be able to come up with something again, or we've got our own doubts about how far the panel that is appointed by Parliament is going to go, given the experiences that we've already gone through. I've already indicated some of the experiences that we have had in terms of the electoral reform. So we, as Boikanyo has indicated, we're not competing with the panel that the minister has appointed. We will complement each other. The approach that Parliament has taken in the past has been largely a technicist approach, where a few people get together. The main criticism has always been that there's not been enough consultation. So that technicist approach is not really helpful in terms of taking the process forward. But also, we feel that with our participation as civil society organizations, we can be able to benefit the country with the collective wisdom of all the organizations that are participant in this process. And we will make sure that the approach that we take, it's a mass-based approach, because we come from civil society organization, and because we come from civil society organization, our inclination is to consult as much as we can. And we will indeed be using that as one of the most important approaches going forward. We will be able to develop, using the collective intelligence of everyone, we will be able to develop some kind of policy options that the country can look at. We'll look at the pros and cons of whatever we're going to be developing, so that people can actually be able to see how we arrive at a particular decision. And the fact that we've got now a technical person, a researcher, who's going to be assisting us in this particular process, I think is very helpful. Just to reiterate in terms of the objectives of this panel, and I'll go through what we have here. The first objective is to analyze the current electoral system in relation to the state of our democracy. Secondly, to engage with formal state processes regarding the electoral reform. I've already indicated that we don't see ourselves as competition to the panel that has already been appointed. We will be trying to complement whatever they will develop, and then we'll see whether there is a point of synergy in this process. To develop a framework or a blueprint for an alternative electoral system that will contribute towards deepening democracy and strengthening accountability. And lastly, to mobilize civil society and popular movements behind a long-term and broad electoral reform and other democratic reform campaigns. So this is exactly what we intended to do. And we will be having forums with the civil society organizations again, where we'll be consulting with them on whatever we will be developing, so that whatever we develop is informed by the collective intelligence of everybody in the country, particularly civil society organization. And then once we are done with that, then the work that we set ourselves to do, we would have completed it, and we will disband in order to allow the country now to take that particular process forward. And I think that's all that we would like to say at this stage. And I'm not too sure as to whether there will be questions, but we'll be ready. Everybody here in the panel will be a participant in terms of responding to whatever issues that you may want to raise with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ndate Terry, for that. Deeply appreciative, and also equally deeply appreciative to the folks in the stream. I'm usually a person on the stream, so this is why I can't leave them alone. So please, we're now moving into the session in which we can have questions and comments. But before I open it up, I wanted to give an opportunity for some other panel members if there's anything that you'd like to share. I'm not putting you on the spot. You don't have to climb the soapbox if you don't want to. All right, okay. I hope you're not going to be covered till time immemorial. No, comrades. Yeah, let's not be covered time immemorial. So I'm going to open up now for any questions, comments, or anything folks would like to clear up, and I'll walk around with the mic and I'll pick up the other mic also so the panelists have one. Not everyone all at once, oh my gosh. Oh my word. Thank you so much for breaking the ice.
Hi, my name is Ismail Jusub. I'm the Manager of Constitutional Advancement at the FW de Klerk Foundation. I commend my vote council putting together this panel and for initiating change. I do have a few questions, not just one, if you'll allow me. And the first is, could the panel maybe just clarify what specific measures or what metric will be the success of this proposed panel? In other words, what do you want the eventual result to be? How will success be defined in that regard? Another question is also, instead of this just being a tokenistic gesture, how does the panel ensure that the voices of ordinary citizens on the ground are heard? So what measures for public participation are there? Will your reports be made available and so forth? And given that the recommendations from the Van Zyl-Slabbert report and others were never recommended, how can the panel ensure that the recommendations from this panel won't fall into the same fate? Lastly, I also represent the youth. I'm a young person. And so the Ministerial Advisory Committee has been criticized for lacking youth representation. And how will the civil society's electoral reform panel address this gap specifically in terms of the youth? What role do you see specifically for young people in this electoral reform panel? Thank you.
Thank you so much. The nice thing is, since you are the first person to ask a question, you could ask all three of your questions. It might not be nice to other questions. Panelists, do we have, did we take down all the questions? I'm going to take another set of 2, and then I'll hand over to whichever panelist would like to take a jab at it. Just for jokes, yes, Mama, I see, just for jokes, the youth is in the room. I know I look 45.
Thank you. My name is Mbongiseni Buthelezi. I'll introduce myself as the incoming CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Yes.
And this is not a question to the panel. I want to ask the members of the other panel in the room if I can ask them a very unfair question, or not make a very unfair request of you. If you could just tell us a little bit about where your process is and where it's going, so that I think we can hold the two panels in view simultaneously. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mbongiseni. I see your hand. So you'll be the second round, ne? I'm just going to close off the first round. Please introduce yourself for the people in the street.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Ikadekit Okonera. I'm representing African Diaspora Forum. I'm an executive there. My question is that the panel speakers have told us that there were 2 previous submissions to the parliament or where, but nothing has been done. My question is, can we be briefly, some of us don't know what that was, briefly if that's outlined, and also this panel, what difference, what additions are they going to make that we make an impact of whatever we are trying to achieve here? Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, so that closes the first round of questions and comments. I am aware you're on the hot seat, right? So you do have a second to decide who I shove a camera. Right? Okay. So, panelists who would like to take a jab. Ow, Comrade Dan.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much for those questions. I'll take the first four, and I guess, Terry, I'll ask you to take the last one about the previous reports from the Faust van Zeeslabert and what their recommendations were. So what?
Dan, I'm sorry, I want to be rude. Do you mind introducing yourself fully,
Okay.
and the organization that you're based at? Yeah,
Okay.
for the 20 people on the stream.
Sorry. Yes, my name is Dan Mafura. I am the senior researcher at the Council for the Advancement of the African Constitution, CASAC, and a member of this panel. So what metrics will we use to measure the success of this panel? Look, I think the idea is that we try as best as we can to influence and shape the outcomes of the state's electoral reform panel. Obviously, there are areas of convergence and areas of divergence, and the idea is that as a panel, we form a particular view and our best for that view. And hope that it makes it into the final report, right? But it's also, again, the panel is only one part of a broader process of public engagement, of advocacy, of public opinion on the question of electoral reform. So we will see just how much we can get the public interested in the work of the electoral reform panel, and whether or not there is, the possibility of building a mass project or mobilizing around specific issues. And of course, I mean, the public is free to judge us, to assess our work. Our own peers are welcome to do that. Other organizations that have been working in this area in very many different ways. How will we make it more accessible to the public? Of course, I think all of our reports are going to be public, and again, we are going to look at running public education, public advocacy campaigns, trying to popularize the work of the panel, this panel and the state panel as well. And so I think we are trying our, it sounds kind of, hypocritical, or, yeah, to say, it's not an elite's only thing, but I mean, it is. But we are committed to making it open, making it accessible to the public, getting ordinary South Africans involved in the work of both these panels. The question about recommendations, I think, is important and quite an interesting one, which is that previously there wasn't. So this panel is actually, I guess, a second or third stage in the kind of fight that we've been involved in over the years around electoral reform. And the first was the MAC, the Ministerial Advisory Council Committee, which obviously didn't go our way. But when the electoral amendment bill was being considered in Parliament, we fought really hard to get some kind of sunset clause because of what the policy position that was taken and the draft legislation. And we didn't necessarily get a sunset clause in the classical sense, but what we did get was a commitment in the legislation to say this system only exists for the 2019 election, for the 2024 election. So for the next one, we are going to need a new system. And this is how the electoral reform panel comes into being. And so I think that because we have something enforceable that we can take to court if we need to, this puts us in a much better position. And as I've said, we're not trying to be, adversarial or kind of counter the work of the state's panel, but we are trying to complement their work, but also influence the outcomes that they will ultimately reach. So I think we are in a very good position in terms of whether or not we will eventually see the implementation of whatever recommendations come out of our research and our work. The question of youth involvement, obviously there's a lot of young people on the panel. Yeah, there's a lot of young people on the panel. Certainly more than the state's panel. So that's a feather in our cap. But yeah, it's youth involvement is something that's quite important, and I think we'll have to find strategies and ways of communicating with younger voters or young people generally who have lost interest in electoral politics and politics writ large. But it's something that we are keenly aware of, and we will try our best again in our public education campaigns to try get as many young people involved as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that. My gosh. Okay, the panelist wants to come. I'm sorry, panelists. I'm paid by the second. I was told I must segue everyone in. Jokes. People must laugh. Don't take yourself seriously. It's a Friday. Why are we so tight? Before I hand over to Thapelo and then Comrade Mas, to also be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, equal education is on the panel, and equal education represents 7,000 young people, and they meet almost every month. So, and another thing, and this is me personally, the question of whether the youth is becoming a tokenistic question when the vast majority of people are young people in South Africa. So the youth is here, and they'll continue to be here. I'm handing over to Thapelo now, and then after that, Comrade Mas. Ntate Terry first. Okay, Ntate Terry, then Thapelo.
There are quite a number of things that have emerged from the presentations that were made previously. If you look, for instance, in the Slabet report, the essence of what you were saying, or the majority view in that report, so the report of Slabet is divided into what you call minority report and the majority report. But as I indicated, the Parliament decided to stick with the minority report and not follow the majority. The majority essentially were saying the time has come to really look at the total review of the electoral system in the country, and that the country needs to be divided into constituencies. They have mentioned a number of constituencies that are supposed to constitute South Africa. But obviously, to develop the constituency, there is a process of delimitation that has got to be undertaken. You've got to look at the population. The number of people in South Africa are no longer the same as at the time when the Slabet report was presented in 2003. There is a lot that has actually happened. But it is some of those options that have actually given to say, these are some of the things that we need to do. And essentially what they were trying to do is to ensure that there is an element of accountability in the electoral system. The current system, as you know, because it is based on proportional representation, favors the political parties more than it favors accountability to clearly defined constituencies. So South Africa would have to be divided into constituencies, and then those people who will be coming from those constituencies would be representing, those people who are coming from those constituencies. I think that's the essence of what was emerging from from that particular report. There are key principles that that they had also outlined in terms of how you should develop the electoral system, the issue of simplicity, accountability, ensuring participation, etc., etc. And the reform that was supposed to have been enacted by MEC essentially was supposed to be dealing with now the participation of individuals other than through membership of political party. You recall that earlier on when I indicated, what I said to you was, what I suggested to you was that the 22 panel was established largely as a response to the Constitutional Court judgment, where New Nation Movement had actually taken the Electoral Act to the Constitutional Court and basically argued that it should be regarded as invalid and unconstitutional. And then based on that particular report, rather on the Constitutional Court's judgment, Parliament had to review the legislation in order to ensure participation of individuals other than through membership of political parties. There were quite a number of weaknesses in that, and I don't want to go through that because we have outlined quite a number of the difficulties that we had with the position that was eventually adopted by Parliament. But Parliament also realized that there was a problem, and hence the new panel that now they've actually established to say they must look at the new process of the electoral reform. But those reports are available. If you want details around them, you can always get detailed information around those reports, including that Constitutional Court judgment on the New Nation Movement.
Thanks, Ntate Thiri. At least Ntate Thiri nkutlwile.
Okay, no, thank you very much. My name is Thapelo Mohapi. I am the General Secretary of Abahlali Basemjondolo Movement of South Africa, a social movement that has more than 150,000 membership in the 4 provinces of South Africa. And I want to address, I'm saying this because I want to address the issue of public participation. And of course, if you look at the panel, you have my colleague on the other side, Bab Mazibugo Jaha, that comes from the rural areas, works in that context. I work in the informal settlements. And of course, there will be researchers, academia. So it's a mixed type of panel. So my interest is to hold the academia and researchers to account to ensure that the voice of those who are marginalized in communities come out clear in the panel. So the research must also involve people on the ground, the people who are rooted. I mean, we may not take some of the things that have happened very seriously. There were people who did not understand the new what do you call it, in terms of the voting, where people were told that you can only vote where you were registered. A lot of people who did not get the opportunity to vote, and their rights were denied because it was not communicated properly. There was no voter education to ensure that those people exercise their right to vote that we have. But also, I think my other part is to ensure that when the report comes out, it comes out in clear, easy to understand languages, in all languages, so that the people on the ground, somebody in the informal settlement must understand it in their language, so that it's easier for people to actually exercise this very important rights that has been fought for so hard in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thapelo, for underscoring that. I hope we won't get a question about public participation. Comrade Maz.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Mazibuko Jaha. I'm from the Zabalaza Pathways Institute, which got invited to be part of the panel. In the work we do, we work with movements like Abahlali and other movements to ensure that the voice from below, urban, rural, can be a factor in the political system. That's just my introduction. Picking up on what the panelists have said, the very existence of the panel is a democratic act in itself, which I think is important that we assert that all the time. At times, democracy is seen as action by people who are in government. Then we debate in terms that are defined by those in government. But actually, we should not forget that democracy, a lot of the time, should be about action from below. So this panel is just but one small contribution in that regard. It's about active citizenship. The fact that already we're having this discussion underlines how we can dynamize democratic debate as civil society, and that is absolutely crucial. One of the objectives that Ntate outlined includes a phrase that says, we're also keen to explore possibility for other democratic reforms. Remember, electoral reform is but one avenue of deepening democracy, but there's a whole range of other things which our democracy needs to take into account. For example, we do not have the capacity and ability as society, as voters, to recall elected public representatives. There's no framework, there's no system. There are other avenues which we can think about along a similar line, where we increase the realm of power that's exercised by ordinary people. So another contribution this panel is going to make then is going to be some proactive thinking in terms of other democratic reforms. The last point I want to make is, without being unfair to the panel convened by government, but often processes of parliament or of government are opaque or somewhat cushioned from public pressure, whereas public pressure and public engagement, whereas a panel of this kind is of civil society. It does not pretend to be acting on any government mandate, but simply because it is from civil society, it just opens the possibility that we have a reference point, we have a platform through which to think critically and usefully in deepening democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mazibuko. With that note, did you decide who do I give the camera? Or both of you? Should I come with both mics? Okay. Before I open up for the second round, I see you, sir, but there was a lady there at the back who had her hand first. So before I open up for the second round of questions and comments, I'm going to give the government or the states panel an opportunity to share, because there were two kind of either questions or comments leveled directly at them. Are we comfortable with that? Okay, so please don't forget your questions. Okay, all right. No worries. Will you stand, sir? All right, sir.
Good morning. My name is Richard Sizani. I'm the chairperson of the Electoral Reform Consultation Panel, which is a parliamentary panel and not a government panel. The second thing I would like to say briefly is that as chairperson, I must admit to the colleagues who have talked, I am 65 years old, so I'm quite old. But if I was in China, I would still be in the Youth League. but I must say, to be fair, Dr. Skuman, who is the head of our research and a panelist, I don't think can be counted to be in my age. He's half my age. Thank you very much. The first thing I just want to say is one thing. I'll talk a little bit just about our mandate, and I will give Dr. Skuman just to give you our timelines so that you can know what we're working on. We're set up in June. Our mandate basically was the response that was felt that our electoral system, which has run some years, now needs to be changed. So we were asked to research and to ask questions as to what is wrong with our system, why should it be changed, what should be changed, or what should it be replaced, and what it should be replaced with. So we were asked to actually come out with proposals about how to reform, how to change, how to replace the new system so that in the 29 elections, we can have a new system. Right, okay, okay. So that is really our mandate. But the second thing that makes us quite different from other panels that you have mentioned, we have not been asked to either rank or to actually make a single proposal. We've been asked to bring several options to Parliament, for Parliament to choose. But what then has been emphasized to us is that we must know what are the advantages of that system, what are the disadvantages of that system, what is the cost of that system, and secondly, what are the constitutional implications of it. So our panel is actually not limited to only come with a system that is based on the constitutional system and so on. So we are set up in terms of the section 23, and we're doing that. So what we've already done now is on the 13th, we've issued the call for submissions for parties, political parties, independents, civil society, and individuals to actually make submissions to us by the 30th of September. That will be our deadline as to basically what they see is right or wrong with the system, what changes should be made, and what they think are the merits and demerits of the system. And then briefly, so that you can, when you work, know what we are working on, I'll keep my colleague just to tell you, in terms of our phases, what are our timelines. Just what are our timelines, so that you can get a sense how you interact with us.
Just for the people in the stream.
Sure. There we go. Thanks, Richard. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alberto Skuman. On the question of youth, I recently turned 30 and I've been feeling really existential about it, so it's really lovely to still be called a young person. Thank you for that. Mbongiseni, thank you for your question as well on where we are. So we've spent the last 2.5 months developing our program of action, setting out how we'd like to use the full year that has been granted to our panel to investigate, consult, and research on different options. And we've also now set up a work stream around the various research programs that we would like to investigate. So our expectation is, as Richard has mentioned, that we'll be sending out a call for public submissions. And the expectation is that by the end of September, we'll have the initial submissions from the public for our consideration, which will feed into a discussion report. So over the next 3 months, we'll be working on our research and investigations, taking into account what the public has shared with us. That will feed into a discussion paper with the expectation that by December, early December, we'll publish that discussion paper with the expectation that there will be further comments from the public. And then over December, January and into February, we'll engage in quite a broad work stream around public participation. We're planning on going to all 9 provinces to consult very, very widely. We've even had some discussions this morning around considering potentially doing a survey if that's possible. But really, we're also quite interested in getting a broad buy-in from society on this. I think it's very important. And then after that session of public consultation, we'll start writing our final report for Parliament. I expect starting May, and the expectation is that by the 29th of May, we have to submit our final report to the Minister of Home Affairs, who will then table it in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I stand corrected, sir. Parliamentarian. panel. Look at me being a young person. I'm quick to change, quick to learn. Look at me. Oh, my word. All right, so I'm opening up for a second round of questions and comments. I did say I am a lively MC. Look at the camera folks scrambling.
Hi everybody, it's Natasha Perry here from SABC News. So I just want to soundbite Ndate Terry and Ausbikang on the issue that's before the Western Cape High Court, the legal challenge to the Electoral Amendment Act. We know that judgment is reserved in that, but remember, I think my vote counts once the court to reinstate the 2 key limits to the Political Party Funding Act. So can I have a comment from both of you? Thank you.
I appreciate your honesty. You want a sound bite, no drama. Gosh. I'm going to, there's another hand here. After this, oh, okay. So 2 more hands and then over to Ndate Terry and Minaj. Okay.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Buichoko Ditlake from Kagiso Trust. I was wondering, we are moving from a number of very fundamental baseline assumptions. One of them is that we are having a rapidly declining interest in elections or participation in the elections across the social spectrum, very rapidly. Secondly, the second assumption is that we are moving from is that the existing electoral reform is beneficial to some, and especially political parties. And the end arbiter in this process are political parties in parliament, if I'm understanding it correctly. The key question, therefore, that arises, given these assumptions, and the sub-assumption is that the notion of the active citizenship is also depleting precisely because of the widening mistrust of our democracy and the leadership value base. Now, given those difficult assumptions, the question that arises for us, for the panel and civil society broadly, is how are we going to excite South Africans to participate in this process in the first place if they don't see a value in participating in the elections? Related to that is another question that says, how, and I hear the colleagues is saying they are going to have forums. How then we are going to break the mold? Our assumption, as I heard from the panel, is that one, they are not creating they are complementary to the parliamentary panel. And secondly, related to that is that they are they are not adversarial. But given our history and electoral system, on the panel submission, it's a very, because we may sub-battle of the further transformation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. One more question and then handing over to Ndate Terry and Minaj. I hope the panelists have been jotting down some of the questions that are coming up.
Thank you. Elami Gamanding Lindo Velem, and I am with Ephesus. Previously, I was with another organization in Makanda. And I just want to ask the question around parliamentary constituency offices. They are there, and then they are a government office and not a political party office. However, there's no direct accountability from that representative to the community it represents. And I am not of the elitist side. I work majority with communities. How then do I start this conversation? Because I remember we were preparing for electoral work with the 2024 elections. And the idea was to have the representative in front of the people, ask them, what have you done for these people? And then account on the mandate that was given. But that loop is not coming through. So how then do I, in deep rural Chris Hani district and in Limpopo and in KZN, start the conversation around electoral reform? And how do we put this puzzle together? Because we have constituency officers, ne? But they are not accountable to the constituency, which is not a political function, but merely because they are a member of parliament representing people on the ground. So I'm trying to understand. If I were younger, I wouldn't ask this question because I hate sounding dumb, but I just want to understand.
Don't worry, you don't sound dumb. If you had kept quiet, you would have been dumb. So, that the 31st or Manash? Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's a bit unrelated to the launch of the panel, and it's difficult for me to answer because as I speak, the judge is handing down judgment on our court case from Monday. Monday, yes. So the judgment is being read orally right now at 10:30. So it's difficult for me to comment on anything, but but to give context. So the Electoral Matters Amendment Act was brought into operation in May this year. And when the act was brought into operation, it removed key thresholds in the Political Party Funding Act. So it changed the regulations in the Party Funding Act. In fact, it removed the threshold. So our argument in court was that it created a lacuna. So up until now, donors to parties could have been donating unlimited amounts of money, and we would not know about it. So we went to the Western Cape High Court. We launched an urgent application in May, asking the court to reinstate those limits. The court heard arguments on Monday this week. All the state respondents, so the presidency, the ministries of Home Affairs, Justice, and one other ministry, all said they'll abide by the ruling. The National Assembly also said they'll abide by the ruling. The DA asked the court to be admitted in the case, and the judgment we're going to hear today is going to say whether the DA will be admitted. It's also going to provide clarity on whether there is a lacuna or not, because the DA is arguing that there is no lacuna, and is going to make a judgment on if there's a lacuna, what must be done. I'm sorry to the SABC, but I can't comment on the judgment because the judgment is being read now. Maybe we can speak in an hour.
Thanks, Minaj.
Let's look at it from a different perspective. There was a lot of excitement in the country when Party Funding Act was introduced. And the reason why there was such an excitement is because there is an appetite from the general public to understand who is funding political parties. And the fact that Parliament had taken the decision to introduce that legislation was a step in the right direction, and it was a positive thing. And of course, there were still some weaknesses. If you recall that there was a formula that was used. The first formula was 90-10, which meant that 90% of the money that was allocated to political parties would be allocated according to proportionality. In other words, in terms of the number of the seats the political party would have. And 10% would be then distributed equitably. Parliament then changed that formula to 2/3 and 1/3. Basically, 33.3%, which was going to be distributed equitably. That obviously benefited the small political parties. And 66.6 would have been distributed proportional to the number of seats that the political party had. That now has been changed again. It has gone back to 90-10. When we first made presentation to Parliament, and unfortunately, this is an aspect that I personally feel strongly about. We had suggested that the formula that should be used should be 70-20-10. And what did 70-20-10 represent? It would have meant that political parties would get allocation, 70% according to the number of seats they have, 20% according to women representation, and 10% equitably. That would have changed the legislation basically to force the political parties to ensure that there are more women participating in Parliament. So if you allocate political parties 20% of the money and saying, this money you would get based on the number of women you have in Parliament, that would actually act as an instrument of transformation. And unfortunately, the issue of women participation has completely been left out. So we're only dealing with equitable distribution and proportional representation distribution. So if you had to ask me in terms of where this should go, I would still insist on turning the Party Funding Act as an instrument of transformation, and particularly by ensuring that political parties get a certain amount based on the number of women that they have in Parliament. But we'll see how the court case goes. And it does not mean that civil society must sit back and say that since the court matter has already been dealt with, then there is no need for pressure. We've got to continue to try to pressurize Parliament to do things that we believe are correct. And in my opinion, as I've indicated, and this is just my personal opinion, the issue of women participation and transformation is important, and Party Funding Act must be used as an instrument of transformation.
Thank you, Dr. Terry. The youth would say it'd be a mic drop. Okay. Whoa.
Hello everyone, my name is Makanata Ziambi and I'm from Equal Education. So I'd like to address the second question from the right there. So the first statement you shared was that there's a decline in public participation within elections and democracy as a whole. So I think one of the reasons for that is because people do not have a sense of trust for the electoral system in its whole, and that's why this panel is very important, because it seeks to address and ensure that they fix the electoral system, and that's one way you can ensure that we get more public participation. And then the second part on how the previous panels were in a way beneficial to political parties. This is also why it's important that we have these panels. And then secondly, that it be the NGOs which lead these panels because they don't have any ties with any political parties. They stand on a very impartial and objective ground, unlike the previous panels. For instance, the one where Kgalema Motlanthe was on, he was a member of the ANC, so that means that in a way he wouldn't be objective with the suggestions that he makes and within the panel. So this is why this panel is very important, because it comes from a very impartial ground and subjective ground. And then the second one, and how we're going to excite the public or ensure that there's maximum participation, as the leader from Abahlali Basemjondolo said, they have like a large membership, and all the different NGOs involved have a really large membership. So the people on this panel, or the panel in itself, isn't a stranger to the general public. We already have a hold on the public. They know us. It's not just a panel that just came out of nowhere. People are aware. So then this then means that there is going to be maximum participation, even more than there has ever been in the history of South Africa, because each and every NGO that is involved here has a very large membership, and a membership that's very active and would very much be able to participate in this.
Comrade Mans, can I give to Nicole first? Okay. Thank you for speaking it into existence. Now, you manifested our panel to have participation.
Hi, my name is Nicole Fritz, and I am on the National Working Group of the Defend Our Democracy movement. And I just wanted to follow on from that response. I think, as has been indicated from the questions and the submissions from the floor, and has been emphasized here, obviously the declining numbers of participation in our elections is of tremendous concern, because we remain a new democracy that needs to deepen and embed ourselves, rather sort of than retreat and withdraw from the democratic fundamentals. But I think this sort of declining suspicion, this increasing suspicion and distrust in democracy is not something that is unique to South Africa. It is a trend that we're seeing globally. And I think a number of thinkers around the world are wondering how we excite public participation, and how we do that through sort of democratic innovations. Some people have advocated greater public participation, and we're seeing enhanced calls for that through processes like citizens' assemblies, citizens' panels. And really, I think that this panel and the establishment of this panel, and really we're at the sort of outset, this is a meeting called in order to launch this panel, but this panel really is part of that tradition of citizens' assemblies, citizens' panels. We come together, obviously we represent, and we are here representing different organizations, movements and campaigns, but we are sitting and serving on this panel sort of in our individual capacities. Not all of us are elections experts, as Ntate Terry is, but we've made this undertaking that we will participate in good faith, that we will apply ourselves diligently to the submission and the evidence that is placed before this panel. My sense is that we will be happy to adhere to a principle of radical transparency in terms of what is submitted, how we work through those submissions and the evidence, how we engage with them, that we will deliberate in good faith. I think for us as a panel, it is tremendously heartening that the parliamentary appointed panel regards this civil society initiative so seriously that they have agreed to participate and send representatives to this launch, and we thank them for doing so. And I think that speaks to what this dual, potentially parallel process does. But we can't, representatives from our panel, representatives from the parliamentary panel can't speak to what the outcomes of these two processes are. But I think for the public, if there were to be a radical divergence in outcomes of those processes, certainly the public in having sort of radical transparency offered by us, full participation, they would then be able to question, I think, in a much more informed, concise way, why there has been this kind of radical divergence in views. And I think that is to empower the public. And so my sense is what we are doing here is very much in this tradition of these democratic innovations along the lines of citizens' assemblies, citizens' panels. And as I say, whilst we are very much at the outset of our journey and have yet to agree on exactly how we will work and our processes, there will be this principle of radical transparency. And we are obviously, all of us, committing to engage with what is put before us in good faith and to deliberate in good faith.
Thanks. It's in response to this question about exciting the public. What Nicole has just said connects with what Minaj said at the beginning. How do we imagine our democracy? How do we reimagine our democracy? I think our panel can make a contribution to that question in a big way. Already Nicole talks of the notion of democratic popular assemblies. That could be a way to reimagine democracy. Already, the fact that this panel exists speaks to the possibility of informed debate. And informed debate outside of the interests of what I would call the party political elites who are concerned with expanding or maneuvering around power. If we reach out to trade unions, to churches, to civics, to youth groups, to sports clubs, to the women's movement, and so on, all of a sudden we can create the possibility of re-exciting people about what democracy should mean. The very question the panel is about how can we imagine a different electoral system that's more democratic, that's more accountable. So I think that value in itself is important. But ultimately, all of this points to something else, which is a huge challenge for civil society broadly. Building those organized voices you are referring to. Organizing around electoral reform, organizing around deepening democracy, but obviously also civil society has a big question it faces, organizing around social and economic issues, which ultimately are the bread and butter issues that concern communities. This panel is not about that, but it cannot be deaf to the need to organize on those real issues as well. So ultimately, when the panel from Parliament presents its report, the measure to assess the work we'll have done as a panel is to what extent will we have organized voices in civil society broadly to make a contribution, but also using that phrase that Minaj used earlier, reimagining democracy anew. I think we can frame something powerful there.
Thank you, Comrade Mas. Another mic drop. Always shook when you speak.
Yeah, so I just wanted to respond to Lindogutle's question about parliamentary constituency officers and how to start the conversation about electoral reform. I think you start by pointing out that they don't work, right? And the reason why they don't work is because, one, the MP is probably not from that community, but two, the MP is accountable to their political party and not to their constituency, right, where the constituency office is. And I think that's a good way to start, to say this is exactly why we need electoral reform. That's why we need direct accountability between elected officials and communities. And so I thought, you know, that question was really important and kind of frames in concrete terms the kind of work that we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dan, for that. And now I have to do the uncomfortable thing of motioning a closure. Yeah. Briganyo has been giving me eye contact from the corner of the room. So I thought if I come this side of the room, you know, she'll ease up because I was sweating there from her eye. So is it better now? Okay, okay. Should I turn on the fan? All right, you may not. So I'm just going to do a last-ish round of comments or thoughts. These are not questions to the panelists. And for those who are in the room who still had burning questions, you can't come to a 2-hour session and for all of your questions to be answered. So just hold that too. Any final comments or thoughts? Okay, so there's only 2 final comments and thoughts on the floor, and I've seen those hands. None of them can pop up again. And these are just comments, not questions. Comrade Maz, look at you, reminding me of my people. The 20 people on the stream. Do you have questions or comments? Oh my word, I forgot my constituency. Vote for me.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of our panel to welcome the launch of this body and to also say we are available and willing to engage. Our panel has agreed that we will receive submissions, but if people have also returned some submissions they would want to discuss with us, we are available to actually talk to them in engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we can go home now. Bye, guys.
Thanks. My name is Kugan Pillay. And my comment, not a question, follows from Mazibuko's issue of quality leaders that we want in Parliament that represent members' interests. So I sit on the board of Stellenbosch University's Stellenbosch School of Leadership Anti-Corruption Unit, and I'm the incoming stakeholder relations and campaigns head for Corruption Watch. And as Advocate Susanna knows, I worked in the presidency before, helping to finalize the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 5 years ago. 5 years later, we see very little signs of implementation. So I think it's a breath of fresh air that we have the government of national unity. And the question is, we spoke about the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission, we spoke about the Motlanthe Commission. We didn't speak too much about the Zondo Commission. And Zondo also brought in electoral reform because we want leaders who are decent, who represent members. So my comment is, how can we as a collective help fast-track the implementation of the Zondo Commission with regard to electoral reform? How do we make sure corrupt members don't get anywhere near leadership positions and anywhere near the till? Thank you.
There were questions or not comments. I felt lots of question marks pop up at the end of your sentences, sir. But I'm a firm believer of non-closure is closure. So those 2 questions as an invitation for us to sit with and think about. It is very easy as individuals to come through and be contrarian about things. But what is it that we are doing to shape the kind of democracy we all want? So the invitation that the panel is giving everyone here in the room and the 20 folks in the stream and the others who will watch the stream afterwards is how do we collectively take ownership of our democracy? It's 30 years old. How do we ensure it grows older collectively? I'm going to hand over finally to the panelists if you want to say anything. Or if Ntate Terry. Ntate Terry, what is that? Ntate Terry. Nekenana rutlora haiduma ya tsamaya. Koloi ya Elia. Yes, okay, let me do it. Are there any questions from the stream? Are they shy? Are there comments? No, if there's comments, we can't address those comments. These are people, we'll see them on YouTube, right? Or do you want to address the comments? Do you want to hear them in the room? Oh, okay, folks are saying yes. All right. The stream, this is your chance. Gosh. People on the stream. What are the comments? The first comment is, we are, here I am trying to make sure I pronounce the word properly. But this is someone from an organization around disability rights in a rural village in the Eastern Cape. And one of the organizations that they're working with is not happy in relation to the Electoral Commission regarding the special voting. And then the same person made another comment, and they said, I'm so glad I get the opportunity to listen and hope that we'll be involved next time. I hope so too, comrade. Those are the two comments. Are we happy? Are we comfortable? There was a comment from StreamYard, but I mean, that was a notification. Thank you so much to the folks on the stream. I appreciate you because I'm usually the person on the stream. And thank you so much to our panelists. And most importantly, thank you so much to the parliamentarian panelists for joining us. And as a young person, amuse me by saying thank you for co-signing our process. Thank you everyone in the room for joining us for our Civil Society Electoral Reform Panel launch. I'm hoping that you will track and look at some of the things that we'll be dropping. We do have a site that will be live soon that you can engage with. And if there's some questions that you have, you'll be able to find out how you contact us and engage with us. That being said, there's some refreshments in the other room. So please feel free to grab yourself a little sandwich, a little samosaki, and a little juice, and let's engage till we go home. Thank you so much, folks. Goodbye.